The dip pen, a tool that has played a huge part in comics, mangas, and illustration all around the world. The main benefit to using a dip pen is the amount of control they give you on your lines, since nibs being made out of metal have a flex to them, allowing them to produce thick lines and thin lines in the same stroke. This video is going to be your one-stop shop to all you need to know about dip pens, from how to use them, how to prepare them, and what inks to use. This video will also contain general inking tips, as well as in the last section you will find a full time lapse of me using the dip pen to ink a painting. There are two main directions you can go for when buying dip pens: sets and buying each item individually. My advice would be to buy a set, since it will do a very good job at making you familiar with a large variety of nibs and give you a good understanding of which nibs you might prefer. Dip pen sets usually come with a set of nibs, which can include manga nibs as well as calligraphy nibs, and they usually come in two variants: straight holders and obliques. I want you to get a straight holder if you plan to do drawing with them, which this video is all about. A straight holder is pretty much like a pen. On the other hand, with oblique holders, they're not exactly ideal for drawing. The other option is buying things individually. If you go down that route, look for a decent holder like the ones by Tachikawa, and also get a G-nib, a blue pumpkin nib, as well as a small detailer nib to get you started. You can find those links from JetPens below. Another large topic that you need to explore are inks. And the fun of dip pens can't be discussed without talking about inks, since one of the biggest things with dip pens is the large variety of inks that are available to you. All inks work with dip pens, but generally pigmented inks are used. Some good recommendations would be Speedball, Kurotake Sumi ink, as well as the Kurotake Special Black ink, which is waterproof. You can also look at Doodler's ink. On the other hand, you can also use fountain pen nibs with your dip pen. For example, the Pelican Brilliant Black, as well as the Platinum Carbon. You can find all these links down below. Now that you know what dip pens to get, as well as what ink you might prefer, before we jump into inking and techniques with the dip pen, you also need to know how to properly take care of them. Dip pen nibs are steel nibs, which allows them to flex and create the iconic line variation. That also means that they are prone to rust, so they come with a special oil coating from the factory which needs to be removed before you start. If you skip this step, ink won't stick to your nib. There are two main ways to remove this coating: using a flame or by heating up water. Some weirdos also use spit, but that seems unsanitary and we won't be covering that. Personally, my preferred method is heating up water. Heat up some water in a cup in the microwave so it's hot, but make sure it's not boiling hot. Usually around 30 seconds in the microwave should do the trick. Place your nibs inside the cup and cover it for around 15 minutes. Once done, take your nibs out and pat them down with a paper towel. To finish the removal process, use a lighter to gently remove any remaining oil that might still be there. Alternatively, you can also use a lighter, but do note beginners often ruin their nibs by heating them too much, so if you do it very carefully and gently. Congrats, your nibs are now prepared, and you are free to start working. Before every session, you will now be required to use a lighter to gently heat up the nib before you use them, to remove any oils from the surface that might have transferred from your fingers onto the nib. Once you're done using a dip pen, clean your dip pen nibs with the help of isopropyl alcohol and store them in an airtight container away from moisture to prevent any rusting. In this section, we will be going over dip pen techniques and how to properly ink with a dip pen. First thing that you want to ensure, especially with pigmented inks, is that you have to shake them before you use them. These are pigmented inks, so over time pigment can sink in the bottom, so you do have to shake them a bit before you use them. We'll heat up a nib to remove any oils that might have transferred from our fingers. This much would be more than enough. And before I make a stroke, I will do a few on a separate page to ensure there's no ink blobs or ink splotches on my actual drawing. Okay, give me a second. Also, the benefit with the Kurodake Sumi Ink 60 is that they also come with a holder to hold your pens. I drew a few shapes for you. We'll start with some basic techniques such as line variation. So a good practice with the pens is to learn how to do thin lines as well as thick lines, and you need to learn how to do them interchangeably. So you can go from thick to thin, and you can go from thin to thick. You need to be able to do these very comfortably at pretty much any angle. This will take some time getting used to, but you will eventually understand how to properly do it. Also note the way I hold the pen. You won't hold it vertically like this, you will hold it slightly at an angle. This ensures that no ink will drop on your page and will ensure that your page stays clean. Also take note that pigmented inks take a while to dry, so make sure if you're right-handed, work from left to right, and vice versa. If you're left-handed, work from right to left. Make sure not to go over these and work from top to bottom. I'll leave you off with a few inking techniques so you have a good idea about where to start and what to do. We'll first start with basic gradients, then we will move on to doing spheres and textures. You can achieve a basic gradient just by going from a higher density to eventually a lower density. For spheres, do take into account how your line actually sits on the surface. So it's not going to be flat. So for example, you won't shade it like this. That's not right. You will shade it according to the form of the sphere. So we'll shade it like that, following the form of your object. Keep a note that I'm taking care of the gradient over here and I'm not rushing this. Do take your time. Inking can require some time. Don't rush it. The more you rush, the worse it will get. That's your terminator, that's your core shadow, that's your highlight, and that's your reflected light. If you want to add an ambient occlusion, just add a shadow at the bottom. Oh, actually it will be like this, and that's your ambient occlusion right here. For textures, however, the story is quite different. For example, when we're drawing hair, we're not drawing every single strand. What we do is that we suggest hair. The goal is not to draw every single thing, but to suggest every single thing. The mind does the rest. So, for example, if I do draw a little hairball, we will indicate that its texture and its form using the silhouette and a little bit of the inside of a shape. So again, do note that I am still following the form. Don't do this flat. Don't do this like that, right? This is wrong. Make sure that you're following the form when you shade. And obviously, it's up to you how in detail you go with this. Similarly, for sausage shapes, we also need to be aware of the intersections and the surface lines. For example, this is how the surface rotates in space. You need to be aware of this, which since your shading will follow this as a guide. So when shading, you will shade according to this and according to the form. Just basic exercises like these are really good enough just to give you a good idea of how to ink. Most inkers you find will ink using surface lines, as I am doing over here. It's just a lot more detailed. I am rushing this a bit since it's a video, but if you do take your time, you can create really interesting things like this. And have a lot of fun. For cubes, it's pretty much the same. For cubes, the surface is really flat, so obviously your lines will be very flat as well. So for example, this is the light direction, right? This light directions mean this will be completely dark. Notice it is still at an angle. If I'm going this way, I will switch it and go in that direction. And since the light is coming over here, means there is less light going towards this area. So it will be a gradient from light to dark, and from here it will be from light to dark as well, from here to here. So make a line, and from really dark, light, and you make another line from really dark to light. And that's pretty much it, especially when it comes to inking with a dip pen, as well as just general inking tips. Do take note about how the surface rotates in space, and always shade according to that. Don't shade flat images. Remember that you are creating an illusion. The image you're creating is not technically 3D, it is flat. But in order to make it appear 3D, in order to confuse your viewer and hypnotize them, to make them see that it's 3D, you need to have good understanding of surface lines as well as form. A good course for surface lines as well as form and shape would be Drawbox, which is a free online course and is linked down below. Okay, moving towards the last part of this video. This section will just be an uncut version of me inking this entire drawing and explaining a bit if needed. We'll first prepare a nib, heat up the nib a bit. Also, these are a few more tools that I will be using throughout the drawing. So I figured I should tell you guys that as well. This is the Pigma fine brush, this is the bold, and this is the medium. These three, and as well as the pentel food. All these 4 pens will also be used, but I will primarily be inking using this and explaining how to use this properly. These will mostly be used for very large areas that can't technically be done with this. So yeah, let's get this started. I'll start off with the hat, and then we will move from left to right since I'm right-handed. I'm using a bigger nib over here. The link to the dip pen I'm using is also in the description. I'm using the small set by Montmartre. It's not bad, but I mean, to be honest, better if you buy everything individually. However, it's way more of a headache, and it's It's way more convenient to just get a set, and you will have a pretty good idea of where to go and what to do. Individual buying everything individually is also nice, but generally it takes a bit of tinkering, properly understand what you like and what you don't like. Because I have some recommendations below. Sure, you can start with that. That's a good place to start. However, there's also the fact like the nibs I share might not fit perfectly to with your art style, and that's definitely something you need to take care. Okay, let's get this started. And feel free to rotate your page as much as you want. Find a comfortable angle and start from there. Don't shade at an uncomfortable angle. Sorry, don't ink at an uncomfortable angle. This is the ref, by the way, and if you guys are interested, you can also draw this with me if you want and share it. I'd love to see it if you guys have been watching the tutorial so far. This is one of my longest videos that I have done, but let's see. And you will shade according to the form. Could have rendered this out more with watercolor, but figured it will be better to do it in ink. I will also be using a bit of acrylic paint towards the end. This also a Montmartre, but yeah, dude, it's weird. I buy a lot of Montmartre stuff because it's like, to me, it's a really good bang for the buck. They're dirt cheap, and the quality is to be honest good enough. I'm no professional, but at least for me, the quality is good enough. It's more than enough if you want to learn and get good at a craft. My advice for inks would also just be to start with one basic ink like the Sumi ink, or honestly don't get the Sumi ink. Get some. I'm using the Sumi ink over here, but don't get that. Get something like India ink. I do have like a bottle somewhere around here, but I do have a bottle of that, but it's local. So you guys probably won't be able to find that at all. So I won't be recommending that. But if for those who are in Pakistan, in the same country as me, it goes by the name of Gold Star. And personally for me, like, it's good enough considering how cheap it is. So for the US people, it's less than 50 cents, which is absurd considering it's India ink. Oh yeah, a little known something that you should also know is a little bit about the composition of the inks, For example, India ink is comprised of charcoal and I believe water. No, not water. I think it's binder of some sort, but it's mostly made. The pigment there is charcoal, right? Really fine charcoal. Sumi ink, on the other hand, consists of, what do you call it? Soot. So basically, when you burn a candle, the black layer. If you burn a candle under any surface, there will be a black layer on top. That's soot. Sumi ink is made from that and a binder. So generally, both are pretty good. I don't see a huge difference. I usually use Sumi ink towards projects that I want to make a bit more polished. Otherwise, I usually use the cheap India ink, because I'm just usually doing practice sketches, and that's good enough for me personally. If you're doing anything polished, you can use good ink. If you plan to do watercolors, by the way, look into the special Kurutake special black ink. I've heard it's pretty good. The reviews are solid, so I plan on getting that myself. It's completely watercolor. Sorry, it's completely waterproof. And dude, like, it seems like a really fun thing to have, And look at this, I'm doing the same thing that I did with the gradient over here, this one. I was honestly not planning to add a video on the inking side of it as well. At least, like, I was planning to only include the technique side of it. I was also planning to include the entire inking process. But since a few people in the past have also asked me about how I ink, I figured might as well make one to help those people. What I'm doing here is basically I create a very sharp edge, so like that, and I fade that out with dots. So that's also a technique that's often used in inking. It basically gives an illusion of texture in simple terms. There is no texture really, it's just me adding a bit of stippling. The stippling is basically when you shade using dots instead of lines. Also, if you do hear that weird noise, that's my chair. I don't know what's going on. I need to actually get that fixed. Or maybe I'll get a new chair in the future, who knows. But it's making weird noises. And I don't like it either, but it is what it is. Another general tip that I have for anyone when it comes to ink is honestly not to stress over the mistakes. You will make mistakes. It's very common and normal, to be honest, to make mistakes, especially in ink. But, be comfortable with it. Be okay with the fact that, yeah, you're making mistakes. Sure, there's nothing wrong with you making mistakes, because that's part of the process. Eventually, as you get better at it, you will still make mistakes, by the way. You will still make mistakes. But you will learn how to cover them properly. So, every single one of my drawings has hundreds of mistakes, but I just learned how to cover them over time. So, if you guys are more interested in ink, you can also do something like I did, was basically just get a sketchbook. Any cheap sketchbook will do, or a notepad, and and keep it ink only. Basically, don't use any other medium besides ink on that, ever, and force yourself to draw every single day on it. Okay, not every single day, do take breaks, you'll burn out, but still, try best and have some fun. Should be told, what do you call it? Drawing itself is pretty much just making mistakes and learning to fix mistakes. Be comfortable with mistakes, and that's how you will improve. Do note that there's genuinely nothing wrong with you making mistakes, especially not. It's common. It's normal, It's common would be the wrong thing to say. It's normal. Like, there's common and common, not dude. Like, no matter what stage you go to, you'll always make mistakes. And I will be using that these pens for the shirt because it's actually way too dark in the reference, and my watercolors aren't good enough to make it that dark. It's like, this is the max they can give me, So I will be leaving those black areas as is, and I'll just be focusing on the other stuff. This is also black, by the way, so I will do this later with a brush pen. Also, now that you do have, if you do buy drawing inks like Swim ink and India ink, don't ever fill that in a fountain pen. It will kill it instantly. Don't even try that. Guess how I know. But yeah, don't ever. There's nothing wrong with you experimenting, but don't fill it in a fountain pen. It'll kill it instantly. Well, to be honest, not instantly, but probably like 10 minutes max. So if you want to kill a pen and do some experiments, go for it. But don't tell I didn't warn you. No? The surface line stuff actually I learned from Heinrich Clay as well as Frank Frazetta. I'm doing a course right now called Force Drawing where we go into how to draw the human body by Michael Matesi. I'll link that below as well if you guys are interested. But actually, I won't be. I don't know. Maybe I will. Who knows? Usually I always make videos that are not scripted, so this is way more comfortable to me. But this time was the first time I actually wrote a script because I wanted to, make sure I get everything across and make sure you guys, have get some value out of your time. And over here, look at this, I'm pressing down to make my line thicker. And I will just be doing this exact same thing. So the same gradient thing, but it's like way more sharp over here. If you want to learn how to texture, again, Drawbox is linked below. Drawbox Lesson 2 is a gold mine. It's a free resource, and to be honest, it has personally helped me a lot. The guy teaching it is called Irshad Kareem, and he's probably the nicest dude I've met. Although I don't like the fact that in the free tier they don't give you the most highest role in Discord in their Discord server. So the completers badge they don't give you if you complete everything. They're like, you need to purchase the course, and I'm like, man. But still, I have done pretty much everything. So for those who are watching this and are from Drawbox, I'm at lesson 7, by the way. I never bothered finishing it though. Like I have done a couple vehicles, but lessons 6 and 7 are pretty much the same, so I decided just not to do that, I just wanted to focus more on this and move on, Look at that looks badass. This is also my first time inking on watercolor paper. You can also turn it around for even a thinner stroke. Instead of changing a nib, you can also do this. Do note it does behave quite differently when you do turn it around, so maybe practice it on a bit on a pen, on a separate page, and then do it on your actual drawing. But there you go, the hat is done. Let's move on to the selfie stick. Another inking tip would be, actually you don't need to highlight, for example, there's a mistake, you don't need to highlight both of these. You can just highlight the area that's away from light, so you can also just highlight one area and it'll do pretty much the same thing. And then you can obviously shade everything in ever so slightly. This is likely gonna be. This is my first proper video that I have posted on Instagram. On actually second, the last one I did was a review on a sketchbook I got recently. But still, I got this mat recently and it looks really nice now. So the desk below just looked really sad and annoying. So I was like, dude, I need to like do something about this. Also, do note, like, as you can see, I'm working from top down and from right to left. So sorry, from left to right. So I'm making sure that I don't touch this area because this might still be slightly wet. For example, this area is still wet, right? I'm not touching this. I will rotate the page to accommodate space for my palm. You can also lift it up and do something like just rest your pinky on the page and do it like that. But I haven't been successful with it because I don't have much experience. But you can definitely do this as well. A lot of people do this as well to lift up their hand further. If I'm shading from here, I'll actually just push back and hold it high. Also, if you do hold it at an angle, don't hold it at an extremely steep angle. Do note that there is still ink in here. It will completely mess up your page. If you do hold it at a steep angle, don't do it more than around 20 degrees or so. Because we definitely don't want our entire page to be covered in ink and look like shit. So, you know. Go. Let's do that. If I am close to this area, I will move my hand further. This is the further leg, so I'll honestly just hatch it out so it separates this from the front really nicely. Now this, look at this, like this surface basically sweeps in like this, right? Inwards, as indicated by a silhouette, right? So you will shade according to that. I won't shade like this, right? I won't shade like this. I'll shade according to that. So I can shade it in this angle and I can shade it in this angle. But I want to highlight this movement further. So I'll shade it like this. It goes really dark around this area, right? So we will make it really dark around this area. We won't be, since we are inking, we will highlight the darkness further. Again, take care of your line weight. The areas that are away from light will be slightly thicker compared to the areas that are towards the light. Towards here, the light is. And this painting light is over here. Sometimes I would like, sometimes I would, I would lightly shade areas over tightly packed shading to tone that area. See, instead of starting at the right, I'm starting at the left. Because if I did start here, it would be total pain to do this. And this area is still not dry, by the way. So do keep that in mind. It takes a while to dry. Like this is finally dry. That's just saying. But that's finally dry. Now I can do this for you because this area has dried. See? Swimming is generally way more harder to control than yank. But generally, the cheap swimmings are way better than cheap yanks because they're way darker. And that's pretty much it. The rest of this drawing will be inked using these, so if you want to stick around, by all means. Otherwise, we're done with the dip and inking in this video so far. Okay, now that a majority of the ink has dried, we can move on to actually inking it with brush pens and adding our more harsh shadows and lines. I'll be doing this at the end because that's a really big shape and will interfere with how I draw. We'll start with smaller shapes and then we will move on to bigger shapes. Simple, right? Yep. Yeah, this has dried. But still as a precaution, I will still place my palm away from the drawing. I'm using the Pigma FP or fine brush over here. You can also still do this with the dip pen, however, it will take you way longer. Or on the other hand, you can also use the ink with a normal brush. Just make sure you don't use the brush for anything else, just a normal synthetic brush will work. And use the ink that way. That area is still wet. Yeah, I think we will just move on to bigger areas. This is the pentel feud. You don't need a brush pen, by the way. You can also just fill ink in something like this. This is a water brush. Just fill any good fountain pen ink inside this and you'll be good. But these have a way finer point than those. So yeah, we are gonna use these. Okay, well, thinking it's done. Now we'll just add a bit of highlights and we're done. This is water, by the way. There you go, the painting is done. Hello, the entire video is now done. For those who need any other help and have any more questions, please ask them below. Thank you for sticking out to the end, and see you in the next one.